everyone, welcome to this special series of programs called The New China, and now we're on our way to Guangdong from Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. Now, if you look around, it's so beautiful, the weather, the blue skies and everything. And also joining me today is Lindy. Lindy is going to take over from Michelle. Michelle just left, right?
That's
so
right.
Lindy, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Jinhua. It's a pleasure to finally be on the program. I've been watching.
Finally.
I've been watching from the sidelines, seeing everything that you've been getting up to, and just waiting my turn to come and be a part of this exciting journey as we travel, across southeastern China. And I'll be on this journey now for the next 10 days. So that'll be traveling through 4 provinces and 1 major municipality. That, of course, being Shanghai, where my journey ends. But it's definitely such a great way to start my trip here in Guilin. What an absolutely beautiful place. And I know you've had an opportunity to experience and explore in less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
What were some of the highlights, though, for you over the past
Some of the highlights, like yesterday, right? And we were in Guilin, that's with Yangshuo. And we say east or west, Guilin is the best, right? But Yangshuo is the best among the best. And they said, this is a very good starting, you are wearing red.
Yes, of course. You must really make a first impression, right?
That's very good first impression.
Yeah.
Especially in China, right?
Exactly.
It's red, definitely. Of course, in the meantime, we need to introduce our guests once again, our old friends. So Andy Mock, the senior fellow, at the Center for China and Globalization, and also Han Hua,
Hi, Lindy.
Yes,
welcome.
We've actually met before.
Yes.
We were together last year on the real-time
Right,
China
it was very
tour.
exciting. So I'm looking forward to more exciting findings together with you. I know you come all the way from Nairobi to here, so it's a very good start that you can compare the landscapes and natural beauties blessed by Mother Nature. Compare Nairobi and the Guangxi, Guilin in particular.
And I must say, just doing the research or leading up to this trip, I was researching about these karst topography landscape, something I'd never heard of before. I'd never heard the word karst before. And I was, reading up about it and looking at various pictures, but I think nothing really prepared me just for seeing this landscape firsthand. It is unbelievably beautiful. It's just beyond my imagination. So a really amazing start to see what Mother Nature has blessed this part of China with.
One of the things we talked about off the air is that that these formations are in some ways otherworldly. I mean, you don't really see them in other parts of the planet.
Yes.
And we were saying, hey, our tagline should be, you got to go there to know there, right?
Exactly.
Because you can read about it, but unless you see it for yourself, it's really not the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so happy that headline finally made it to air.
That's right, and also that's the inspiration for many of the painters and artists, right?
Yeah, from the history,
that's right.
From the ancient times to the current times. Guilin and its mountains and waters, the lakes, the rivers, has always been the inspiration, even the muse for the Chinese ink painters.
And what was your favorite part, though, of this experience? I know it was very short. It was only 1 day in Guilin, but your favorite moment?
I know we actually talked about a lot about ecotourism yesterday, and my personal take will be some new dimensions or my personal interpretations towards this ecotourism. When we speak of ecotourism, we immediately think about Guilin or Guangxi is the best place to describe or to upgrade the Chinese tourism industry into its new version because of its natural resources, the beauty, the landscapes. But I want to add, the human part to this ecotourism because I think people is the core or competence or the advantage of this ecotourism development. I heard a story yesterday when the local developer introduced the external developer, not only the money but the talents from all over the world and all over China to come to Guilin to help build some new resorts areas to not only utilize the mountains and lakes, the rivers, but also to utilize the local legendary stories, the folk tales, to make either the movies, other media products, the cultural products, even the merchandise products, as well as the show's performance utilizing the mountains and the rivers. We happened to saw one show last night. So that is my take of the ecotourism, which is adding the human or the cultural part to that.
Absolutely.
Maybe I can add a little bit of numbers to this. You told us a very personal story, which I think was very actually moving, seeing that performance. But if we look at Guangxi, the entire autonomous region, according to the Guangxi Tourism Data Center, 288 million people traveled to Guangxi as tourists in 2018, spending $113 billion. So we think about ecotourism, just the numbers are frankly kind of staggering. 288 million people, that's almost the population of the entire United States. And we talk also about that, Guangxi is one of the lesser developed regions in China. And yet, there's all this talk in the trade war that, China's economy is weak and it's under pressure. But I would share 2 points. I think one, we could see here again 113 billion US dollars spent in 2018 on tourism. And we look at some of the infrastructure. So the highways that we drove here on, some of them actually go through the karst mountains. And what does that say? That shows that it's very expensive to put a highway through a mountain rather going around it. And I think it shows 2 things about the Chinese economy. One, that it has the financial resources, the financial wherewithal to undertake very impressive civil engineering projects. And second, it has the technical expertise to do this. And Lindy, coming from Nairobi, that the Mombasa-Nairobi rail is another, I think, great example of China's ability to do these kinds of projects.
I mean, I think that engagement, and perhaps we can talk about that another time, but that engagement between China and Africa has certainly been something that's been very much welcome when you look at the investment in infrastructure and how it's really transformed regions for the benefit of tourism and indeed the local economy. But I think it's time for us now to perhaps check in on our colleagues on other routes.
Yes.
Of course, we're not the only ones traveling across China for the new China series. Let's now check in with our colleagues in the northeast. Jeff and Huiyao, tell us about where you are today.
Translates as big celebration, because this is where they discovered China's biggest oil field, and they've been celebrating here pretty much ever since.
Yes, but the oil revenue has been going down, since the oil output has been dwindling since around the 2000s. But at the same time, the city is trying really hard to change this image of being this oil field, all greedy, and they want it to be more green and sustainable. So how does that transition work for the city? We are now checking with our reporter Feng Yilei, who's at the ecological park of Daqing oil field.
In 70 years, China has undergone unprecedented transformation. From its old industrial base in the northeast to its new manufacturing powerhouse in the southeast and to its emerging southwest, CGTN offers you a panoramic view of contemporary China. Our crews will travel along 3 different routes and come to you live from dozens of locations and free mobile studios. Join us for an all-inclusive look at China on our TV channel and digital platforms, September the 9th to the 20th. It is New China, then and now, in celebration of the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, only on CGTN.
Well,
it's a lovely day today, and you can see we are now surrounded by acres of Guangxi flowers blooming beautifully. I'm pretty sure that it's hard to tell if we are in an oil field or a nature reserve, but actually we're in the China's oil capital of Daqing. Well, most of you may know Daqing for its steady production for nearly 3 decades, up to 50 million tons of crude oil per year. But actually, Daqing as an oil city has also made great achievements in environment protection and ecological restoration. Today I'm with Mr. Yuan Xiufeng, who's from the Department of Ecological Resources Management Department. So what we're going to do is to take a look in this area, which is now nicknamed as a ecological park of the Daqing oil field. But actually, Mr. Yuan will tell us what it really is. 就是想请给我们介绍一下这个我们现在处的这个位置到底是一个什么样的一个地方呀？
这儿呢是咱们大庆油田采油1厂、1矿、3矿和5矿这么一个位置，占地是40平方公里。咱们这个油田生态建设示范区就在这儿。拥有
我跟我们的观众先介绍一下。So actually, this is Plant 1 of Daqing oil. It is the mine 1, 3, and 5 of Plant 1 of Daqing oil field. It covers a vast land of nearly 40 square kilometers, and it used to be a major production base of the oil fields, the first plant, but now, as you can see, it's a demonstration area of ecological construction.
咱们这个40平方公里的示范区呢，拥有油水井5000多口，计量间160多座，各种站所150多座。
So Mr. Yuan just told me it has over 5000多
口油水井。
5,000 oil wells and 160 metering facilities， 还有160多个
计量间，
对，还有150多个
150多站所，油田生产的站所。
Okay, and 150 production facilities and buildings. They are all covered by the woods and bushes. As you can see, I would like let my cameraman to pan around. 你看这边，咱们看一下这个周围。So over there we can see a typical pumper in the oil field. It is very rare for you to see what they call a nodding donkey that is surrounded by beautiful purple flowers. And also here we can see a little pond. 那这个袁科长可以给我们介绍这个水池，它是。
咱们脚下呢，这是原来的一个南一路垃圾场，填埋式垃圾场。通过建设那个南一路的时候，这个垃圾场那个污染很重。油田可能想把它搬迁之后呢，需要投入很多的这个运输的这个费用和这个2次污染。但是咱们考虑把它做成一个山，通过这个清淤扩湖。把这次垃圾给它埋在咱们脚下，
所以说这个池塘就是说，这个我们现在脚下的这个山就是由这个池塘和垃圾组成的。
对对。
Okay, so basically this hill which we are standing upon is made of garbage and mud from this pond. So at the very beginning, there was a dump pit right here, and it costs a lot for them to relocate this waste yard. So they finally decided to cover the garbage with mud from the pond to create a more comfortable and environmentally friendly environment here for the production base. 那我们现在整个的这个生态区可不可以再给我们就是由您来引路，带我们去看一下有一些什么细节的一些地方？
好吧，咱们上车。
Okay, so now Mr. Yuan will take us to get a closer look at the. 哎，您请这边。哦，谢谢。您先请，对。
personal boundaries because everybody's boundaries are different.
Right, exactly.
And there are cultural expectations.
Has undergone unprecedented transformation. From its old industrial base in the northeast to its new manufacturing powerhouse in the southeast and to its emerging southwest, CGTN offers you a panoramic view of contemporary China. Our crews will travel along 3 different routes and come to you live from dozens of locations and 3 mobile studios. Join us for an all-inclusive look at China on our TV channel and digital platforms, September the 9th to the 20th. It is New China, then and now, in celebration of the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China.
Well, we're back now, and here on our way to our next stop, we can see the beautiful landscape, including willows and cattails. So, Mr. Yuan, what have you done to create those beautiful vegetation in this area? 就是您对这个种植这边的植被是不是花了很大的这样一个功夫呀？
哎，你需要我说什么在接下来的时间？ Okay, so we have some. Apparently, our reporter has some signal problems, but she seems like she's been talking to people in the ecological park, asking all those questions.
The signal problems are inevitable, really, when you think of the scale of this project. These 3 buses travelling throughout China with all of these live broadcasts on CGTN, on digital as well, all the live streaming, all the different cameras, all the different shots. It's inevitable that every now and again a signal pops out and you're a bit stuck.
It has been generally fine so far, don't you think? Like,
absolutely.
Thinking about how we've been traveling from Inner Mongolia to Heilongjiang.
I was saying to you the other day, wasn't I? You know, when I was your age,
sure,
long time ago,
decades ago.
Careful. Last Thursday, you know, we had satellite trucks.
Oh.
So when you came to do a live show, you know, the satellite truck pulled up and the huge big satellite, you know, slowly came up and it scoured the sky trying to find a signal, you know, and you couldn't just suddenly run to a location and press a few buttons and
remember what we show our audience, like prior to we embarked on this journey, what are the equipments we use?
Yes.
Or the cogent and flyways. It took some time to set up the flyway, but most of the times a cogent, a portable device, is sufficient, is enough to run all these broadcasts.
And of course these days, you know, you can just press a few buttons on your phone and there you are, off you go, you're broadcasting.
And we're now on the road. You can see all those trees and blue skies. It doesn't look like an oil field or a based city.
No, absolutely. We're stuck in traffic again. We've been stuck in traffic for a fair amount of time. Last night's journey, I thought, was fascinating, wasn't it? You know, we journeyed through the night on very bumpy roads, didn't we?
Do you still remember what time we got in?
Into Daqing.
Into Daqing.
3 o'clock in the morning.
3 o'clock, yes.
Yeah, 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a long old trip on bumpy roads, wasn't it?
Yes. But I mean, you know, to me it's an exciting experience. You know, we get to wake up in different locations, different cities every day throughout the 12-day journey.
Yes. And it's all about teamwork as well.
Yes.
Because we've been sitting here, the 4 of us, and when one of us feels a little bit like, oh, what's going on? I've forgotten what's coming next. The other one picks us up and helps us. You know,
teamwork.
If there's a little bit of gap, Ina will bring out a pack of cards and we'll have a game of cards, or we'll have a chat about.
I feel like we're all, you know, comrades, and we have formed really strong bond with each other.
We have, haven't we? We have.
But let's now toss back to our reporter, Feng Yulei. Apparently she's standing by, still at the ecological park of Daqing, which means great celebration in Chinese, a city built not on brick and mortar, but on oil.
In 70 years, China has undergone unprecedented transformation. From its old industrial base in the northeast to its new manufacturing powerhouse in the southeast and to its emerging southwest, CGTN offers you a panoramic view of contemporary China. Our crews will travel along 3 different routes and come to you live from dozens of locations and free mobile studios. Join us for an all-inclusive look at China on our TV channel and digital platforms, September the 9th to the 20th. It is New China, then and now, in celebration of the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, only on CGTN.
Short answer. No 3 volume.
All right. Okay.
Exactly. And when you kind of think of the history of this sort of place and what it must have been like when they first discovered oil here. I mean, I sort of think of, it reminds me of something like San Francisco in the 1900s when they discovered gold, and suddenly, you know, everybody descends on that region and there's that air of partying and festivity and richness, and suddenly everything's great. Was it like that here, do you think?
No, not at all.
No? They discovered oil.
Yes, they discovered oil, but I mean, the way that China is set up, it was going to be, the amount of investment involved. Remember, China at that point, very, very low reserves of hard currency and things like that. We're talking about 1959. So, what they did, it was going to be a state action. This was not a thing where people descended and started drilling their own holes and wildcatting. What they did is that China was very happy to have a large amount of oil. And the question was, how are you going to bring it out? And then you have to refine it. So there had to be a tremendous amount of planning. Now, this area was not a big city. It had formerly been like a hunting preserve. There was lots of wetlands and forests and things like this. It's been actually a royal hunting ground.
In the beginning, there used to be, I think this place, Discovery, was a secret.
Oh.
It was not really announced the location. Some Japanese reporters, they discovered from a photo released on the newspaper, and they discovered there are, some snow on top of the train shipping the oil, and then they guess, the location of the oil fields must be in northeastern China. But later on, the official news came out saying that the discovery was in.
Think what's happening in 1959.
Right.
I mean, things are not going great with other borders.
Yeah. And I suppose the difference is, back in 1959, and to some extent China today, discovering something like that benefits the whole country.
Right. Exactly, yeah.
Rather than a few wildcats that suddenly get rich in San Francisco because they've found gold in them Dar hills.
Yeah. So the reason we're here, and this is one of the big points, is that this really allowed China to have a certain measure of independence. Right. There's still oil that was needed and brought in, but it took away this dependency that they had, especially given the isolation of the Cold War that had already started up. Also issues at that time with Russia, which had been a large supplier.
But we've been talking about the transformation the city has made. It's going to continue making those strides and transforming the city to more livable and green. What does that say about Northeast? Who has been heavily reliant on natural resources since the founding of the People's Republic of China.
Well, it says that this is a time of transformation. I mean, China has transformed. I mean, they went from primary to secondary and now into tertiary industries. Why? Because the circumstances. Wages are no longer the lowest in the world.
Right.
All right. You still have a labor dividend, but you don't have the same conditions that were true maybe 20 years ago.
I know it's far too early in the morning to use words like intertertiary.
Tertiary.
You don't use those until after 10 o'clock.
Okay, so let us say that China is trying to climb the value chain. How is that?
Let's upgrade its industries.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't use words like that. It's very dirty at this time of morning.
3 coffees
But
words like that.
in the interest, so here you have an area that was dominated, but what people don't know is that as a tourist location, this is they have huge parks. When we were coming in, everything is forested. You think you're in the middle of a really ecological, but when Daqing started, it was very barren. There was not a lot of things here. It was the wild, wild west.
Wild West.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, do you know that's a nickname? Hundred Lake City.
Hundred Lake
City.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, they have ponds, small lakes, that actually will become, the resources of tourism. And this is part of their eco-tourism project.
But because, of course, the world has to stop relying on oil. We know that. We know that more and more.
We need to find a more
day.
sustainable path for the planet.
Okay, that sounds fine. But when you start talking about oil and energy, it is not as simple as what you put into your car. All right, there are a lot of downstream products, and you're starting to see areas like Daqing concentrate on that. We're passing oil derricks by the hundreds as we go along here, and this is the old technology. Now the new technology is creating these complex hydrocarbons that are used in the manufacturing and finishing of electronic products, even medicines, cosmetics. All of these things that people don't necessarily think about.
But what do you think? What does this all mean to the local people? This generation of people has been in this field, contributing to local economy in the country.
That's the whole point. The country that is going to win the economic war is not about putting on tariffs. It's about training your people for the new economy that's coming along. They're putting a lot of money into technical education to upgrade it. So instead of fixing an oil derrick, what you do is you are a chemist and you figure out compounds that can be very.
But it runs the risk of losing talents because talents could just go
this is really the point. When Daqing, for example, is able to set up their high-end manufacturing, some of the talents will see it as an opportunity to work here. For example, in the city of Harbin, which is just about 1.5 hour drive, it is very easy for them to come, back and forth. But more importantly, this new emerging manufacturing industries will provide them the opportunity, to work and to contribute. So that actually provide
but like Volvo,
you're an expert on automobiles.
Yes, you are.
Right. Yeah, I used to work in the auto industry as a consultant, and I think the funding of the Volvo plants is actually, an expression of the geographical advantage and also the advantages of the manufacturing culture. Okay, that will give, Guilin, who is the parent company of Volvo, the needed resources.
So kind of building upon its glorious past.
It's change. I mean, the things that built China to begin with, like Daqing, like these other places, are changing. Yesterday we were talking about ecology, right? Yeah. We were talking about how China is moving forward, taking all of these horrible, coal pits and transforming them back into prairie. So it's, anything you want to take away from these points that we are connecting is that China is changing, that it's ready for the next challenge.
Yes, because of course China has so many electric cars. These days you only have to walk down a street in Beijing to almost hear the silence. And as that develops, and that's going to develop and develop and develop as the years go on, places like this are going to have to change, aren't they? They're not going to be digging into the ground with all of these derricks in, say, 100 years' time, are they? So this whole area will need to reinvent itself.
Yes. But before we wrap up the discussion, we should let our audience see more about Daqing, especially the ecological side of it. So we're going to run a short video, and hopefully our audience can know more about the city.
This one.
It's in the air, and nature is showing off its beauty. Jialong wetland, located near the city of Qiqihar, has contributed to biodiversity, clean water, and provided a habitat for hundreds of animals and plants. Covering an area of 2,100 square kilometers, this marshland is a major migratory route for birds from the Arctic to Southeast Asia. The reserve serves as a stopover and nesting area for a large number of storks, swans, herons, grebes, and other species. Its ponds and reeds make it an ideal home for over 300 different species of birds, including 6 kinds of cranes, especially red-crowned cranes. In April and May of each year, the white and red-crowned cranes rest here, then proceed with their journey up north. The reserve was under preparation as early as 1976. In 1979, the Jialong Provincial Natural Reserve was established by the approval of Heilongjiang Provincial Government. In 1987, it was approved as a National Natural Reserve. 5 years later, when China signed the Convention on Wetlands of International Importance mainly as a waterfall habitat, the Jialong National Natural Reserve was added to the list of international important wetlands. 促回out CGTN.
In 70 years, China has undergone unprecedented transformation. From its old industrial base in the northeast to its new manufacturing powerhouse in the southeast and to its emerging southwest, CGTN offers you a panoramic view of contemporary China. Our crews will travel along 3 different routes and come to you live from dozens of locations and 3 mobile studios. Join us for an all-inclusive look at China on our TV channel and digital platforms, September the 9th to the 20th. It is New China, then and now, in celebration of the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, only on CGTN.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the southeastern parts of China once again. So we were around northeast just now, right? And we were talking about oil producing facilities or something about ponds, right?
That's right. It sounds like they were talking about some lovely landscapes, right? Flowers, ponds. But I think our landscape beats theirs, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I just like the signal tossing all the way, and then we can see the contrast and diversity of China. And then now we are in the heat, and they are in somewhere that is a little bit chill.
Yeah,
and
much
cold,
cooler
right?
than here.
And much cooler. Yeah. So now what we see is the expressway, and we are on our way to Guangdong. And we have been driving for 4 hours already, right? I think.
Yeah, roughly 4 hours, and about 4 more to go, isn't it?
Yeah, and today is a little bit cloudy, but very beautiful, quite celestial, right? It's going to be sunny pretty soon. Okay. So, let's talk about the environmental protection here. And once again, we have our guest, Hanhua and Oz and Mark. Okay, and we talk a little bit about ecotourism just now, about the balance between environmental protection, also the development of local tourism. So, how about the environmental protection before, especially about the Lijiang River? Well, I would like to call it the mother river of this whole region because it goes through many of the scenic spots. Okay, so once in a while, especially in the 1970s, like the industrial waste is domestic waste would be pulled into the river directly. But now a lot has changed, and according to your observation, and what do you see right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, think the best way to think about it is it's gone through these different phases. So before the rapid industrialization in China, the environment here was more pristine. And when we think about ecotourism, many people travel because they want to visit pristine or fragile environments or for the cultural heritage. So some classic places would be like the Amazon rainforest, the Antarctica. So Lijiang was like that as well. So when there was relatively few tourists and mostly just backpackers and very intrepid backpackers, because this was, even though very beautiful, off the beaten track. And then with industrialization and more people coming here, I think China as a whole went through a period where there was environmental protection was less of a concern, because still feeding people, just becoming moderately, building a moderately prosperous society was the top priority. So now we're seeing that China has reached a level of development that environmental protection is probably one of the top priorities.
But I wonder how China is managing to balance the need to protect the environment, but still, particularly in places like this, attract the tourists. I mean, it must affect the building of roads, as we spoke about earlier, perhaps high-speed railways, but just the foot traffic, the number of people that will start coming here. How do you balance that with still the need to protect the environment?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Speaking of environmental protection, not only Lijiang or Guilin or Guangxi, I think all these places in China have been going through its ups and downs in developing tourism industry on one hand, but suffering and then realizing the importance of environmental protection for the sustainability on the other side. So right after the opening up and the reform back in the 1970s, the end of 1970s, Lijiang or Guilin city itself has been going through this reforming, opening up, introducing factories, opening new factories for manufacturing. So they have been suffering from environmental pollution. And in the 1980s and the 1990s, I learned a story yesterday that the current President Xi Jinping visited Lijiang, and now he shared with the people from here by saying that back in the 1970s, when he first visited this area, he can even swim in the Lijiang River. But but now we can do now that. But during that period of time, there were about 1 decade or so that Lijiang was polluted.
So he couldn't.
It was polluted. And then people realized that okay, the core or the pillar industry for this area in particular is to develop the tourism. It's the combination of agriculture industry and the tourism or the third industry so they move these factories out of the city, out of the area. So they purely focus on how to protect the environment, how to utilize the natural resources, and how to raise the education and awareness of the local people, as well as tourists from all over the world coming here, exploring the natural beauty, but also help maintain the environmental together.
And another way to answer your question or look at your question, Lindy, is of the 288 million tourists that came to Guangxi last year, most of them came by high-speed rail. And we think about what has been some of the biggest negative environmental factors around the world is automobiles. And this again, I think we see this synergy in China where high-speed rail is something that China developed. It's high-tech, it's fundamental to economic development, but it's also environmentally friendly. And we see here this is also playing a role in fostering ecotourism in China.
I took a train here to the Yangshuo high-speed railway station, and then from that railway station to Yangshuo the county, the most beautiful county.
How long did it take you from Guangzhou to Yangshuo by high-speed train?
By high-speed train, like 3 hours and a half, and then I took the taxi for another hour. So the high-speed railway was really far away from the place where you can see the cloud formations. And according to the drivers that I talked to, she said, the local authorities wanted to protect this beautiful landscape. And that's why the railway station was really far, but still a little bit inconvenient, I have to say, in that sense.
I mean, that's actually quite a clever idea. I mean, it's a 3-hour journey, but it still leaves you an hour away from where you want to get to, at least just protecting that environment. So you have the train station, but it's not going to interfere with the pristine sort of nature around you. And another thing about the train stations, I think, and it kind of leads us into discussing the economy of this region, is that the train station itself will attract little spin-off businesses around it, won't it? I mean, you'll have shops or malls, and suddenly it begins to itself contribute to the tourism economy or the broader economy of this region.
That's right.
Absolutely. And I mean, from an economic theory perspective, economists would call this the multiplier effect. So, when we had the tour of the resort yesterday, we saw that they hire something like 400 employees, but each of those employees, most of them have a family that they're supporting. And by now having a steady job with good pay and social benefits, that creates the economic resources to support other businesses. So they could be retail shops, they could be other services, and I think the management of this resort was very, very clear about this. And they saw their role not just to make money, but to really contribute to the development, as you mentioned, also the training of a lot of the local minorities here in the modern hospitality industry.
I think Andrew is right, and despite the beautiful landscape here and also the advanced tourism that have been developing over the past decades, and many people actually are leaving Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region because the GDP is lower compared with other provinces and regions nearby, especially Guangdong that we're going to this afternoon, right? And the GDP is still behind many of other provinces, regions. So how tourism is actually very slow when it comes to returns. So
yeah, but see that. I actually maybe have a bit of a contrarian view on this, in that a lower GDP might not be a bad thing, because we look at places like Beijing, Shanghai, or New York, Tokyo, London, astronomically expensive, right? But also because they're meant to support these industries like finance, high-end corporate law, things like that. But when we look at a place like this, the GDP is lower, but also it's a very different lifestyle as well. And I think that by giving people a choice, that's not a bad thing. And we've talked about this earlier, that we all have friends that have left Beijing and Shanghai for a better quality of life in places like Guangxi or Yunnan. Right? So I wonder if this difference may persist. Of course, I think that the economy will grow and people's income will rise, but this goal of maybe equal GDP might not be actually such a good idea.
But would you say that people's standard of living is improving despite the fact that the GDP remains relatively low?
I agree with that. GDP used to be the key indicator of China's economic performance, not only for Guangxi, but also for the whole China, to the world. But after almost 40 years of high-speed growth, I think there should be more indicators to be introduced into this overall economic scale and long-term or sustainable development for a country to move into the next stage. GDP is part of them, but it's not necessarily the overall or the only indicator. For Guangxi in particular, because of its paying or its natural resources, the beauty, the sceneries, so I think it can be a very good experimental place to try the other indicators to show the real happiness level of the people. At the end of the day, it's the people-centered economic development, and as well as the other social benefits and the people's sense of belonging and sense of achievements and accomplishments to be the indicator and to indicate a country's sustainability in terms of their development. And we speak about high-speed train. If we don't have a high-speed train, I think people surrounding this area could not have spent this 2 or 3 days small vacation in this beautiful area.
Well, to go back to this idea of not just looking at GDP as a measure of societal well-being, I mean, we can see that the shift at the national level to high quality growth, not high speed growth, right? And of course that trickles down to the provincial and the municipal level, where government officials are not just evaluated on GDP growth, but things like environmental protection.
So I think the quality is high here.
I personally think it's quite high. Yeah, very impressed. Yes. Yeah, I mean, we could see, obviously the quality of the air, the water, and one thing that struck me was that how natural features are integrated into the tourism experience. So, we watched this performance last night that was essentially an outdoor stage where part of the performance took place on the Li River, part of it took place right out underneath a mountain, and yet the audience was sitting in the resort.
I must say, one of my favorite parts of your experience yesterday was watching the man on the boat fishing. I thought that was such an interesting
like the sea
cultural
hawk.
Yes, with the sea hawks. I thought it was really amazing. And it reminds you that this is not only about the nature itself, but indeed the people that live here, the communities and their culture and their way of life. And I know that, of course, this region is home to quite a number of ethnic minorities. I think
like
the
Zhuang
Zhuang are the main.
red Yao, right?
So I was reading about the Yao people, and I'm pronouncing it correctly, Yao.
That's right.
And in particular, there's a group called the Red Yao, and they're distinguishable by their women. So the women in this ethnic minority group only cut their hair once in their lives. That's when they turn 16, and it's a rite of passage. Thereafter, they have to continue growing their hair. And then, so you'll see adult women with long hair. But now, to distinguish them further, unmarried women with no children wear their hair down. Married women, but with no children, wear their hair in two plaits. And if you're married with kids, you tie your hair up in a turban that ends in a bun at the top of your forehead, which is quite interesting. Of course, there's no such rules for men that apply, but certainly something quite interesting that this culture has still maintained for many, many years.
So you can tell her marital status based on the hairstyles, right? That is very interesting.
The cultures and their living habits have been
in
this region for so many years, for a very long history. But when the GDP was only the only indicator, and the people even living here, young people in particular, kind of were forced to migrate to other cities. The nearest one is Guangdong Province, to work there in those factories. But now with people's attention to develop the ecotourism in their hometown, so we see and we learn more and more young people are coming back to help build their hometowns, while they can also keep their original living habits and their ethnic groups' cultures alive, and pass to the next generations. Isn't that beautiful?
It's very beautiful. I mean, and I think it makes me think a lot about the ways in which many African people also seek to sort of grow and advance in many ways around the world, but very much have the sense of wanting to hold on to our culture and our roots. And I think it's because a lot of our identities are wrapped up in our roots and our histories and our stories and our languages. And that's something I definitely think that the Chinese and Africans have in common.
I would say a lot of similarities, because different traditions, even different dialects, right? In Africa, and we see this in China as well. And I think this is one way the Chinese government has been very progressive and leading in how do you balance economic growth while preserving the integrity of people's traditions and ways of life.
And I'm really happy that you have picked it up, like the Red Yao people, right? And you just arrived like 3 days ago.
You did your homework.
I've been doing my research.
And the largest population here, when it comes to ethnic minorities, is the Zhuang people, right? That is
30% of the population.
That's right, and the largest. It has the largest population, right, all around China when it comes to ethnic minorities as well. Okay, that is why it's called Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. They have their own very special customs. They have a special occasion, and that is called the 3rd of March or something, or Chinese San Yue San, where they're going to celebrate, I think, the whole place, and they have 4 days. They have 4 days to celebrate the whole thing, and they don't have to go to work.
I think Guangxi is a very good example because it has a lot of different minority ethnic groups. It also pays respect to these different traditions, even languages and cultures of these different ethnic groups in their education, in their textbooks.
Yeah.
They have these general textbooks for the school students, but they also have the tailor-made textbooks for each ethnic group students, so they can preserve their languages, their cultures from the childhood. That's very interesting.
Because that's something that's come up in, say, for instance, in South Africa, where I'm from, where they find that children that are going to rural schools are really struggling to cope because they're being taught or expected to write in English. But many times, you know, at home they grew up speaking their local languages, and now they come to school and they have to engage with difficult information in a language that's not very familiar to them. And so the idea of actually bringing the local languages into the classroom will improve their chances of success.
Yes.
And it's always good to be multilingual. Right?
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, especially in this part of the world, because you know, as Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region borders Vietnam, and you know, is an important part of ASEAN and Southeast Asia, that there's many ethnic overlaps. So you know, there's certain groups that live in China, but also in Vietnam, and I think the ability to maintain that linguistic and cultural diversity actually helps to strengthen ties between China and ASEAN.
Yeah, it's nice you mentioned the point between Vietnam and also Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region, and they went to the border between these two places, and then so they have this famous bridge between Vietnam and this side is China, and you see people from Vietnam, also China, they could trade, you know, on that little bridge, and you can also use Chinese yuan to buy any of the
just
commodities.
on the bridge.
Yeah, and those people
really?
are called pounds somehow because they carry the goods on their backs, and then they sell, they do their business just on the bridge.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
So no one ever crosses into each other's country. You just stay on the bridge and do all the business.
Yeah, then you need this visa.
Meet on the bridge.
It's quite romantic in a way.
Border residents, right? They're called border residents, and then if you're the border resident, you have this permit, and then you can cross over to another country to do some business, but only within this area.
So if I traveled there, I wouldn't be able to, as a foreigner or as a tourist, I'd have to, it's only for people that live in that area.
The border residents. Okay, that's just very interesting, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I know in Yunnan as well too. You know that between the border in Yunnan and Myanmar, people just go back and forth, and you know, in fact, you know, trade, visiting friends, relatives.
Some of them share the same language when it comes to the border.
I even heard that there are some Myanmar students, primary school students, coming to Yunnan to study on a daily basis. You know, the travel,
on a daily basis.
The commuting. Very interesting. Having said this, I think you know the global is actually connected. Even we pay respect to different cultures, different languages, but like in Guangxi, you know, we have been travel on the bus, but we are really connected thanks to the 4G or in the future the 5G connectivity. So we are connected. The cultures are also connected and appreciated.
It's nice that you point out the 4G development. Now we're on our way to 5G, probably by 2020. And just because of the infrastructure and also 4G, which is making this possible, right? We're tossing signals back and forth with northeast and southwest. So what do we do now?
Well, I mean, on that note, since we're connecting, let's connect our viewers to our colleagues that are in the southwest. Of course, that's Tao Yuan and Sean Calebs, who are also on this new China journey. Let's find out what they're up to.
Hello, here we go again. Day 3 of our new China journey. Sean and I are still on the move in China Southeast. Today is a new adventure for us because we left Guangzhou Province and we're moving on. We've already entered Yunnan Province, which is also a huge province in China Southeast. Now we're moving toward the provincial capital, Kunming, which is known as China's spring city because the weather there is so nice. It's sunny throughout the year. It's lots of flowers. We're actually going to check out a flower market this afternoon. But Yunnan is actually my favorite province in China. My favorite province in China. And the one problem I have with this province is that every time you come, there's just not enough time because it's just the best province in China. It's got almost half of China's 55 ethnic minorities. It's got amazing landscape. It's got the mountains, the rivers, the gorges, the valleys, the rice terrace. It's just got it all. And I was told that Yunnan, the landscape in Yunnan, actually inspired the Shangri-La in Milton's Lost Paradise.
That's fascinating to me. And excuse me if I sound like a wide-eyed kid. It's my first time being down in this area, and the change in the landscape is just so dramatic from leaving Guangzhou Province, which was really characterized by those very rugged mountains and the karst landscape, that very porous rock that we would see peeking out among the forest. But look at this. This is just gorgeous. This is driving down a wide open plain, it looks like, but there are mountains in the distance. I love those clouds threatening to rain, but so far it has been absolutely gorgeous. And another thing about this province, you mentioned that it is so large. It's actually larger than the state of Germany, larger than the nation of Japan, so it's huge, and it has so much diversity in terms of its flora and fauna, the flowers and the animals that are here. We have a couple of our wonderful guests here with us again, day 3, Victor Gao, Chen Jiahe, thank you very much for joining us again. Victor, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. Fascinating province to me, and it's so large and so gorgeous. Tell me a bit about the exotic wildlife that can be found here.
Well, indeed, it's such a great pleasure to join you for this ride from Guizhou to Yunnan. Indeed, Yunnan is a big province. It's about 4 times of the Jiangsu province, Zhejiang province, larger, as you mentioned, than Germany, larger than Japan, and it's probably the most exotic province in China. It has the most greatest level of diversity in terms of animals, plants, etc. But also it's one of the most southernmost provinces. As a result, it both has subtropical climate as well as tropical climate, especially in the border region, for example. Then it's very tropical forests here. And the minority people are very exotic and very fascinating. As a matter of fact, for example, if you go to Xizhuangbanna, then you see people there who are very closely related to the majority people in Thailand, for example. Wow. So people throughout China come here for tourism, for sightseeing, for staying long term. For example, it's not just day trips,
right,
but they stay here for days, for weeks, or sometimes for months. Indeed, whenever you come to Yunnan, you do not want to leave. You want to buy a home here. You want to settle down.
Whatever time you have set aside for Yunnan, double it.
Double it.
Jiahe, Yunnan actually holds a special place in your heart, right? Because this is like your second hometown. Tell us what the story is.
Well, that's right. I mean, like Victor just said, you come here, you stay. Like my mother actually came here 14 years ago in 2005, and she came here and bought a little cottage in Dali. And she has ever stayed here and didn't really go back to Nanjing for very long. So yes, we stay here for a very long period of time. The reason that my family choose this province is just because it's great for your life. I mean, it's not a great place for making money compared with Beijing or Shanghai, because the economy is much poorer compared with that. But if you have enough money or you are retired, like my parents are, it's a great choice for you. I mean, the nations here, like the Baizu, the racing in Dali, they are really peaceful, and they are fulfilled with culture. They even think that our hand races are less civilized compared with them. So it's all these kinds of things that attract you to Yunnan.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And again, this is part of our new China adventure. We are one of 3 teams crisscrossing this vast, large nation, showing its diversity, showing the differences in virtually everything, the environment, the economic makeup. And right now we're driving on obviously a major highway, carving our way through. And you've been to this province quite a bit.
Many times. Oh my God. When I was in college, I basically spent all my money traveling here. Every vacation, it was Yunnan. I actually went to this, the trip that I memorized the most and I enjoyed the most was this little village right in the middle of nowhere, Bamei village in Wenshan Prefecture. Back then, it was in the, I think it might have been 2014, so a couple of years ago, and you had to take a little boat, and that's the only way to get into that village was by a boat through a completely dark cave.
That's amazing.
How amazing is that?
Victor, you were talking earlier just about the geological makeup, because
even though we don't have the rugged mountains of the province we just left, we are at a much higher altitude. So we're going to see mountains that basically butt up to Tibet, and we're going to see some of the major rivers that carve its way through this vast nation. Tell me a bit about the geological differences in this very, very large province.
Absolutely. Yunnan province as a whole is just to the east of the huge Qinghai Tibet Plateau, which is the rooftop of the world. And this province has many, many rivers and lakes, and also has mountains upon mountains. But then, as you correctly mentioned, there are also huge, large tracts of plains, and there are also enclaves or hideaways, for example, surrounded by mountains. And throughout the generations in China, it has happened again and again that certain tribes, for example, or certain ethnic groups would be living very peacefully without being noticed in these mountain-surrounded enclaves, for example, for hundreds of years, as if they were forgotten by the rest of the country or rest of the nation. And I think it's because of this kind of diversity, it's because of this kind of what we call seven-colored rainbow province for Yunnan.
Wow.
And Yunnan literally means south of the clouds. So you can see all the clouds, all the beautiful plains, etc. And also, Yunnan historically has been a corridor between the Indian subcontinent to East Asia landmass. And there have been many discoveries about how people in ancient time crisscross from the Indian subcontinent through, let's say, Bangladesh, through Myanmar, into Yunnan, and then onto other places up to the north.
Just think of what a challenge that had to be back
Exactly.
then.
This is a fascinating place, and this is also a booming place. This is becoming richer and more diversified going forward.
Jiahe, I actually overheard you saying that nobody knows Yunnan better than you on this bus because how old were you when you came here?
Oh, it's 2005. That's the time when I was only 21. So that's like 14 years ago. So I really know the people here and how their culture was formed because of the geographical features that this province has. One thing I want to mention is that there's a culture in Yunnan called Bazi Wenhua. It's called Bazi culture. Bazi means a little plain within the mountains. That means this little plain actually forms a kind of culture because people are separated by these mountains. They're living in their little plain, in these mountains. They don't go out and reach each other because it's so many geographical obstacles. So they live in peace over here for generations and generations. This kind of culture means different aspects. On the business aspects, it's not good. I mean, you don't make a lot of money. You don't communicate with people.
There's more to life than money.
But for the life side, it's great. I mean, if you're not aiming at earning money, that's great for you. It's really peaceful life. Life has been there for thousands of years, so that's marvelous.
Exactly.
So it depends on how you look at that, but that's called Bazi culture.
And once again, for everybody watching on the internet, watching on any of our other platforms, we'd like to hear from you, where you are, what you think of this amazing adventure we're taking you on. And it's such a technological marvel to me. There are 3 crews, one in the northeast, one in the southeast, and us carving our way through the southwest. As you can see, we have a number of vehicles and taking all these live pictures as we make our way into the province. Now, we've been here, what, about an hour and a half, 2 hours into?
Probably, I would say about 1 or 2 more hours to go before we reach the provincial capital.
So we have some amazing things to show once we reach the provincial capital.
Because who doesn't like flowers, right?
Exactly. She's been talking about this, so we all have to bring Taoyuan as many flowers as we can. That's going to be our goal. See what she can walk away with.
I'll be a happy woman today.
You were talking, Mr. Chen, you were talking earlier about how vast this is and your familiarity with the province. There are many areas in here that just haven't been thoroughly explored because it's so difficult to reach. And you actually have a kind of a funny story about someone that you know that walked a few hundred meters away and got lost for some time.
Yeah, it's all these mountains. I mean, when you look at a mountain, you think you might be able to reach there in maybe in 2 hours. But if you really go, that costs you like 2 days. And it's no mobile phone in there, so it's that kind of. I don't really think it's kind of very dangerous story. Is that many tourists got trapped in these mountains because once they came, they say, "Wow, it's beautiful there. It's a little small mountain, so I'm going to climb it in my sandals." So they did that, and they got lost in the mountains. Actually, Dali government every year they have about 500 rescuers waiting for these tourists. So every year they go onto the mountains for like 10 or 20 times to rescue some tourists coming from Shanghai or Beijing with their sandals and a backpack, and they just walk into the mountains, cannot find their way out. It happens every year.
Mr. Gao, we actually talked about how Yunnan is home to almost half of China's ethnic minorities. If you were asked to tell our audience about one of them, which one would you pick?
Well, there is an ethnic minority called the Bai minority, a very distinguished, highly literal minority, and they take great pride in the culture. And they have accumulated over the ages a lot of songs and sometimes drama, for example. It is really a treat if you can visit their village. They are very hospitable and they have a very distinguished culture, and they will entertain you not only with the cuisine but also with how they look at the world and the culture, for example, that they have been thriving on for thousands of years. This is what makes Yunnan so colorful and so enriching and so rewarding.
And it's so difficult to mention the Bai ethnic group without mentioning Miss Yang Liping, the dancer. She's probably one of China's most famous dancers. And my colleague Yang Jinghao actually interviewed her for our trip. So once we reach Daqing, we're definitely going to check out the Bai villages as well as we're going to see my colleague Jinghao's interview with Miss Yang Liping. I'm really looking forward to that.
If I may add a point, my first visit to Yunnan was in 1985. I came with Dr. Henry Kissinger, a small group he led. And one of the things we did was to visit the Yunnan Nationalities College, which is even today a very important college in this province. And it basically has all the ethnic minorities represented in Yunnan, and they send the best of their school students to the college to be trained, and we met with them, and it's really a very interesting experience to talk to them, to understand their aspiration, and then to eventually in the subsequent years to follow their career path. It's a fascinating thing to meet with as many ethnic minorities here in this province.
Yeah, to me it's fascinating to talk about how China got to this point in history. We've done a great deal looking back, but this new China adventure, we're also looking forward and celebrating all of the tremendous strides this nation has made, celebrating its 70th anniversary. And one thing, China is the world leader in renewable energy, solar, wind, and we're going to be talking about that in this province as well. But protecting the environment is going to be so key. I'd like to hear from both you gentlemen about how you balance protecting this wonderful landscape we're looking at that's also dotted with power lines and a nation of 1.4 billion people that want to be brought into the modern world.
Yes, indeed. Environmental protection for Yunnan, again, is very important. Why? Mainly because biologically speaking, this is a very diversified province, and in a sense it is also very fragile because you have so many flora and fauna which are unique and very specific to this province. And once there is damage or pollution, they may be gone forever, and that will be a loss not only to Yunnan province but also to China, but to mankind as a whole. And further, I think this province is also very much accelerating its industrialization and manufacturing, for example, and we need to make sure that there will be no pollution related to the rapid manufacturing or industrialization progress in this province. Further, I think there is big effort to build up connectivity between this province and Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam, for example, and China really needs to share the best experience we have with our neighboring countries, rather than, for example, shipping some of the polluting businesses out to the neighboring countries.
Right. What's your take on this matter, Mr. Chen? Because on our way here, we actually saw a lot of windmills. Seems like this province is also embracing green development.
Yeah, Yunnan is actually focusing strongly on the renewable energy, or we call clean energy. Hydropower takes about 65%, and wind power and solar power takes another 18%. So it's a huge amount produced by clean energy. Currently, China is the world's second largest largest economy. It requires a huge amount of power, and you have to contain the pollution as well. So what the Chinese government is actually doing is utilizing all the kind of energies. We don't say we focus on hydropower or coal power or whatever that is, but utilize all the energy that the country can get, but try to contain the pollution as much as possible, which means a huge reduction of coal power. A good thing for the country is that China has actually passed the period where it was heavily investing in fixed asset investment. I mean, this kind of investment was growing at 20% maybe back to 10 years ago, but nowadays you can see all these highways, railroads, the airports has all been constructed. So we're actually leaving that period. We're going to the consumption economy, information economy. That means the country does not need that much energy in the future.
And let's not forget about the food.
Yes.
As a semi-local of Yunnan Province, what do you recommend us?
I wouldn't recommend you anything about the local food here because we actually live here. We don't travel here, you know. So my parents got their own kitchen. They actually shop on internet. So my family gets about 3 or 4 packages every day from all over the country. So we just buy whatever we eat in Guangzhou Province. So we rarely go to local restaurants. The local restaurants, they are fulfilled with one thing, it's mushrooms. I mean, Yunnan Province they got so many mushrooms. There is one saying that if you are a person living in Yunnan, you don't get poisoned with mushroom once in your life, you're not actually living here. So many people got poisoned.
That's okay, I'll pass that one. But if you look at the screen, Victor, those clouds look somewhat menacing, but also inviting, you know, in the same way. And it's kind of a microcosm of just how big this is when we get to the provincial capital. Tell me some of the things you're looking forward to doing.
Well, I think Kunming, again, is a very important southern capital city in China. And by the way, lots of people who now live or working in Tibet would come down and settle down for a second home in Kunming or in Chengdu, for example. So there is a lot of exchange between people here in this province with people living further up on the mountains in Tibet. And again, lots of people living in the northern part of China would want to come here to settle down, especially in retirement, as you just now correctly mentioned. They buy a second home, they want to retire in this province. So there will be a lot of fun in Kunming city. And also Kunming is not only the provincial city, but it's also very highly regarded by many ASEAN countries, especially in Myanmar, for example, Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, and also in countries like Bangladesh. They also come here a lot to trade, to study, to do business, and also to intermingle with the local people. So this is also a regional city for this larger part of Asia as a whole. Yes.
We're almost out of time, Sean, but we are right now still moving on to Yunnan's provincial capital, Kunming. It could have been the flower center of China.
I think an enticement to make our viewers stay in and watch, we're going to get Italian some flowers. So if you want to see exactly what kind, stay with us. We're going to be live all this afternoon.
Take it away, guys, in the northeast. Jeff Huiyao.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the southeast once again, and minutes ago we have officially entered Guangdong, so it is not Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region anymore, right? And today we have this very special segment, and we're gonna read out some of the comments we have collected on social media, Weibo, Facebook and Twitter anyway, and also YouTube. So this is Li Zhao.
That's why I'm here. Hi everybody, I'm Li Zhao with CGTN Digital. Hi guys. Hi. Okay, so it's been very tough 4 hours already, and we are officially entering Guangdong Province, as Jianhua said, and we got some comments, and a lot of people saying the beautiful weather, beautiful places. We got this comment from Facebook saying, I had twice visiting Guilin, the Li River, Flute Cave, all is amazing. A lot of people saying they like our live stream. But we also have some comments saying our signal is not that bad. But just to remind you guys, we are doing live show real time, and it can happen if the signal goes really bad because our car is moving, and this is a bus turned mobile studio, so things happen.
Yeah, this is live. So we have 3 routes: northeast and southwest and southeast, right? And especially southwest is full of mountains and the signal is bad sometimes. Or in northeast the connection is always a little bit off. But here I think this is the best line when it comes to the signals because we go through many of the developed areas when it comes to economy, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And certainly now I think we're starting to really see the difference, isn't it? From where we've come from and where we're going to. The karst landscape is now far behind us as we're entering Guangdong officially. But I must say I'm quite curious about the bigger differences between autonomous regions and provinces in the country. I was hoping you could perhaps shed some light on that as our guests.
Well, one of the governance feature of China, especially since the new China is established, is to have a clear line between the province and autonomous region. Autonomous region is defined and arranged by the central government, where there is a leading population of minority ethnic groups. For example, Guangxi, the leading ethnic groups is Zhuang ethnic groups. There are all other ethnic groups like about 11, yeah. And we have other autonomous region in China like Mongolia, Ningxia, as well as others. People may ask, Yunnan has a lot of ethnic groups as well, but Yunnan is positioned as a province because there's no leading or dominant population of ethnic groups. That's the major difference. The other difference from the culture or the daily operation and governance perspective is that to maintain, to respect, and to help preserve the cultural heritage from different ethnic groups in their daily operation by giving the ethnic groups some very favorable policies when it comes to children's entering into public schools. They have favorable, they are actually encouraged and they will be subsidized to some extent about their schooling. And when it comes to this family policy, in the past 30 years for China, but ethnic groups, people, families, they are kind of waived of this family planning policy. They are encouraged to give more children to help also preserve the sustainability of these ethnic groups. So I think
Well, I'll just briefly add to that. I think the key word here is autonomous. And that just means that because, as Helen, you were saying, that these regions have a large percentage of ethnic minorities, that they're given the degree of autonomy to manage their own affairs as they see fit. And I think that's a very, very important governmental, political innovation.
Because it can be seen sometimes as though it were, a political push for autonomy or secession or something like that. But from the way you're explaining it, it's more about promoting and protecting those ethnic minority groups.
The cultures and state preference policy that enjoys the one-child policy. But I don't know if I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong, like Guangxi Zhuang, this group of people actually, like the one-child, they have to observe the one-child policy as well. It is true.
I think that's actually a bit of a complex question because it also depends on whether a family is in an urban environment or a rural environment. Because I think even with the one-child policy for all of China, that, correct me if I'm wrong, Helen, right, but in the rural areas, that actually was not the case. And also, it also depended if you were the child, a one-child family, then I think you were allowed to have two. So I think it's commonly understood that one child meant one child everywhere. But in fact, there are some complexities to this policy.
I think it applies to all these ethnic groups, minority ethnic groups, regarding the family planning policy. It is very strict in the past 30 years for the city, for the Han people. But for ethnic groups, at least they are allowed to have two children for one family, no matter it is from the city or from the rural areas.
Yeah, but anyways, now we have two-child policies right now, right?
Yeah, right. The key word, as Andy mentioned, is the autonomy. It's a Chinese way, Chinese aggressive way, to help protect in a more proactive way to preserve the culture, the heritage, including from the culture to the languages to the living habits of the ethnic groups in China.
But does it make any difference to the economies of these spaces, whether one is an autonomous region or one is a province? My assumption is that the autonomous regions are generally sort of not quite as doing quite as well, economically speaking, as the provinces.
Not really.
That's not true?
Really, right?
I think it's particularly because they're physically located in the region along the border.
Well, away from eastern China.
Yeah. So let's say in the north, as Inner Mongolia, right? It's adjacent to Mongolia.
Yes.
Yeah, and then we have Tibet Autonomous Region, and we have Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, Ningxiang Hui, right? And also here, Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. So we have 5 of them all together.
Yeah.
Okay, but when it comes to economy, I don't really think it doesn't necessarily mean.
Effect, yeah.
Yeah, it's about the autonomy, and then the economy is lower, right?
There's other factors.
Well, I think there's historical reasons as well. I mean, so we look at, part of it is geographical. So when we look at the eastern part of China on the coast, because first it's greater population density, generally speaking, a higher level of economic development historically, whereas as we go west and south, less well developed in terms of both infrastructure as well as we can think of it as social capital in terms of, markets, specialization, things like that. So I think that's one reason. The other thing too is that I think while these, being an autonomous region or not an autonomous region does have some role in economic policy, but I think it's driven more by local economic conditions. So, for example, you look in the northeast, what's sometimes called the Rust Belt of China, that certain policies are needed there, whereas we look at Guangdong, very export-facing.
Yes.
So other policies need to be adopted here. But the thing I wanted to go back to about this word autonomous is that actually points to a larger concept or this kind of Chinese wisdom in that it's about harmony. And it's not just New China. Of course, New China has established some, I think, very effective governing mechanisms, not just economics, but politically. But it also has integrated into this hybrid approach, I think, the wisdom of thousands of years of Chinese history and culture. And one very important concept is this notion of harmony. How can we all get along? Like one of my colleagues, I thought, put it very well, that what China aims for is a shared future, where some countries talk about we must have shared values. You have to believe what I believe, or there's going to be a problem. And that's not a way to foster harmony. Whereas I think the Chinese approach is let's figure out how do we all prosper together with different values, different lifestyles, different aspirations, but we still can live together in one harmonious society.
Yeah, that is the culture in China, right? But we do see like an exodus of some of the people, especially from Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region to Guangdong, where we're going right now, right? Yep.
And what's interesting here too is that this Guangxi, Guangdong, right? So Xi just means west, and Dong just means east. Sorry, right. So Xi is west and Dong is east, right? But this Guang refers to expanse, and this is actually just considered one big area.
Expansive east and west. Yeah, it's very much they're connected.
East and the other one.
Traditionally, it's from west to east, but now we see it's two-way street. We also see people from east to west.
And you also
west
said, autonomy and Guangxi actually, it used to be a province actually.
Yes, you mentioned this. It actually
it was a province until it became an autonomous region because of the large population of Zhuang people here.
But I think also that we can see as well too that this shows, I think, flexibility and adaptiveness in the governing system, right?
Yeah,
some people might think, because it's a communist system, it's very rigid and it can't change. But I think this is actually a great example of where, like you mentioned, that Guangxi was a province, but now it's an autonomous region.
Well, I think we may have to leave it there for today. We are almost out of time. And of course, I think just touching on what you said about harmony, I suppose 70 years is a good time for China to take stock of where the nation is in terms of harmony and indeed a shared future. All of this leading up to China National Day on the 1st of October as 3 teams make their way across the country in celebration of the founding of the People's Republic of China. We'll be back again tomorrow with our teams in the northeast and in the southwest. So from us here in the southeast, goodbye and see you tomorrow.
Bye.